Welcome to Learning Forward with Amardeep, Season 13, Episode 4. I'm Anvesha, your podcast host at Learning Forward. Born in Gorakhpur, Amardeep Singh attended the Doon school. He studied electronics engineering at the Manipal Institute of Technology and Masters in Business Administration at the University of Chicago, USA. He now lives in Singapore. Having worked in the financial services sector for 25 years, he has led the Asia Pacific region at American Express for revenue management of the credit card business. Since the year 2014, he has dedicated himself to visual ethnographic research. He has authored two books, Lost Heritage, The Sikh Legacy in Pakistan, and The Quest Continues, Lost Heritage, The Sikh Legacy in Pakistan. He has also made a few documentary films on the remnants of the Sikh Legacy remnants in Pakistan. Amardeep has led a cross-border team to create a 24-episode docu-series, Allegory, a tapestry of Guru Nanak's travels, available on the gurunanak.com. We welcome you, sir. So please speak a few words about your life, work, and book. Where did it all begin, and how did you do it?
Thank you so much, Anvesha, for giving this opportunity, and Saikaran to you too. It's a pleasure to speak to you all, the young minds who are going to lead the future. Always a pleasure. So where did it all begin? Certain things you can see in the hindsight and you can try and rationalize. But when it is happening in life, a few of the divine gifts that come into our laps are not necessarily easy to define at that point of time, right? So that's what is the moral of my story. But that's like getting into very ambiguous space. And, for children of your age to say that leave everything to chance would be unfair for me. So I do want to give you some structure. But you see, a divine gift, like in our case, because the way I define what we've been doing for the last few years, now it's been about 9.5 years. I see my core skills as getting into areas, into geographies, and exploring narratives that others are choosing not to go into, or don't know how to go into, or their lives would be at risk if they were to get into those territories. Because these are, in a modern world, with the visa restrictions, with political restrictions, with so many other challenges, and as well as the narratives have been dispersed from our minds because of the political divisions that have happened, it becomes very challenging as to how do you get access, right? So that's the core skill set that we are bringing into the table. But this core skill set can only come to you, I say, is that if the divine chooses you to do it. But then the divine is an energy that's looking at your commitment before it chooses you. That's the key to the structure out here. So how did it all happen? Well, in 2014, I left the corporate world. The doors shut down, one door shut down, 10 windows opened. I jumped from one window and I started charting my own path, going into Pakistan, starting documenting. And then 5 years later, there were two books in the offering. Then thereafter, we went on the journey to trace Guru Nanak's legacy across 9 countries, across sites of different spiritual traditions, and trying to understand from his word. But there's a key thing out here. Why did this energy change and choose us in 2014? And there's a structure to this madness. And the structure to the madness is that from a very young age, I remember when I was 17 years old, I had started, other than my school. I mean, I was not a great student, I must admit that. I was just kind of skimming through the barrel, right? But then, life will not be static and the same all the time. It's about what you put. The circumstances at that point of time were not making me a great learner and a great student, but things started changing much later in my life. But at that point of time, I was investing time in trying to understand some elements of our history, especially the Indus region, interested me because our forefathers got dispersed from there in 1947. That led me to spiritual traditions. I started reading a lot about philosophies of the Indic traditions, not just my faith, but many other faiths, because to understand yourself, you need to understand the other perspectives too, right? So that took a long time for me to get a grasp on. Then came a phase where I started delving into musicology. I still can't sing, but if there's something being sung, I can understand the ABCD of that rag, right? And then came a time when I started getting into visual aspects of creativity, like photography, and then I started writing for magazines. And like this, my life went on in a phase of 4 to 5 years of blocks of learning. And then came a time where in 2014 the doors shut down in my corporate world, not by choice, but it just felt at that time it was very disorienting and it happened. But then emerged the fact that I had prepared myself for 25 years, right? And that's where I understood later on when the journey began that things don't happen very fast. I mean, at the energy that chooses you to undertake a certain task is also looking at your commitment and what have you created for yourself. And is there a match in the task that it wants you to do and what you have done for yourself? And when that match happened, the journey began. So that's the sort of a structure within the method of madness, right?
Absolutely, sir. Often we head out so much that we forget to find answers to the questions that matter. However, we return to our roots and discover significant answers about our community, family, and ourselves. What was the compelling need for you to return? And was it because of your upbringing or specific events that unfolded?
Well, it's hard for me to say why it happened, but then as I explained to you, the curiosity was kindled for about 25 years. Now, changing things, changing hobbies, changing passions, layering up to make who you are, deep down embedded within it was, who am I? Now, you look at that, who am I from a physical terminology, physical perspective, or from a deep down a spiritual perspective? That question is twofold, because one is, I remember when I was studying in Doon school, which was pretty much, I passed out from Doon school in the year 85 and joined in 79. I remember going from a Doon school, which was a English medium school, going into my hometown in Gorakhpur. The language would change when you would come out and you would get to the train. The language would change from English to Hindi, and then I would cross Lucknow, it would change to Bhojpuri, and I would reach my home, and my father would say in Punjabi that Punjabi ਵਿੱਚ ਗੱਲ ਕੀਤਾ ਕਰ ਘਰ ਦੇ ਅੰਦਰ, because ਅਸੀਂ ਸਾਰਾ ਕੁਝ ਖੋ ਕੇ ਆ ਗਏ ਹਾਂ, ਇਹ ਵੀ ਖੋ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਤੇ ਸਾਰਾ ਕੁਝ ਖੋ ਗਿਆ. Basically what he was saying is we lost everything in 1947 partition, and at least when you're inside the four walls of our home, speak in Punjabi, because if you lose your language too, we've lost everything, right? So somewhere I give him the credit that he planted this seed in me, and I'm always thankful that he planted the seed when I was in Doon school, to not make me go to the European language, which was a third language option, but he made me go to the language which was my language, which was Gurmukhi, right? So I am always thankful to Doon school that we were just 4 people out there who learned Gurmukhi, or then some of them learning Urdu, some and Bengali, but the masses were learning the European languages, right? And that's where the pull was. But I learned that, and somehow these things were embedded deep down to probe the question as to why do you look different? I mean, I wear a turban, I am a Sikh, right? And living in a Hindi hard belt in Eastern UP, I did look different, right? So, and that would probe a question as to why. And my father was very proud of his identity. He said, this would never be given up, right? So that poses a question, why? And then I would hear the stories from my parents about what happened in the 1947. Most of the times, the stories that were told are one-sided, because the fact is, when a conflict happens, conflict has has a humane approach to looking at any conflict, is that there are two sides to a story. I mean, history is his story. Whose story you want to hear? You want to hear my story, or you want to hear the other side's story, right? But as a kid, when I was being brought up, I was hearing my story. That is my community story, right? And there was always the othering. And those questions kind of kept popping up. And when later on I started delving into spirituality, the bigger question came up is that who am I? Because and this is a more philosophical and more deeper question as to, I'm living in a very intense materialistic world with working for a financial institution where uh, dollars and cents is all that matters in the balance sheet, right? And that's what you're doing day in and day out. But something inside you is probing you to think about, is this what is life? I mean, is balance sheets all that is life? Isn't there a bigger purpose to it? Because you're just involved in a rut, right? Both the sides probe the question as to who I am, or who I am at a physical level and a philosophical level. And that's what I think triggered the journey when I started in 2014. It was, I didn't go on any any religious pursuit. I didn't go any spiritual pursuit to explore the journey. My journey started with simply that my father was from Kashmir, which is now in the Pakistan side in Muzaffarabad, and he could not go. He had built a Shangri-La in his mind, and he wanted to always go back, but he could never go back, right? And that time in 2014, when I left American Express, this desire to go into Pakistan, not for any religious circuit, but to go and see where my father was from. And then the bigger question was an entire glorious chapter of our community's history that churned in the Indus region, where for the first time after 800 years of Central Asians coming inside through the Khyber Pass and pushing deeper and deeper inside the subcontinent, first time in the history that the wave of our community kind of pushed it backwards to Khyber Pass. And where are the remnants of that? I mean, an entire history got wiped out with just signing off on a dotted line by the British to say that the Indian subcontinent needs to be divided based on religious grounds, and that's where it comes to othering, and that led to my journey in the pursuit. And then rest is all. I mean, later on, it just starts coming together into bigger and bigger narratives.
Right, sir. And when you did go to Pakistan, you made the docu-series. Now, talking about the docu-series, as a viewer, it connects to us at a deeper level while following a unique narrative. However, what practical challenges did you face while filming, and how did you overcome them?
So, Anvisha, I mean, I'll just correct out here. My period from 2014 to 2018 was not docu-series. I mean, it was 4.5 years of exploring the remnants of the community's legacy across 126 cities and villages across Pakistan in 5 states, right? Those resulted in the 2 lost heritage books, right? 2018 end, after having done that body of work, the question I was like in any creative space. A creative space is something that you go on a sine curve of acceptance, recognition, and then you go down the sine curve to the valley, because you lose the purpose of life as to what is the next purpose. What is it that you're going to do? Because creative space is not like a corporate world that or like a job that you're doing A to Z, morning to evening. You have to create something in your mind, and that's when this thought came to my mind that that all throughout my school, when I was being taught in the school system, the question about this thing about one of our saints in the Indian subcontinent, Nanak, who actually traveled second most after Ibn Battuta, right, in the Asian subcontinent. He was never taught to us as to from a perspective of an explorer, from a perspective of a traveler. And we were taught about Columbus, we were taught about Alexander the Great, and I said, what's his greatness? All he did was to kill people and expand territories. But that deserves an attention of being great in our books, right? Columbus, sometimes I laugh at it about, we were taught about Columbus, how he came in search for India. But I laugh at it that he came in search for India, but how disillusioned he was that he landed 180 degrees on the other side of the earth into America in search for India. And that's worthy of a narrative to be taught. So that resulted in my desire to say that, hey, should we try and replicate Guru Nanak's footsteps? Because today, because he's bound and into a faith, right, which happens with every spiritual tradition, right? It starts with a quest of a person, but then a faith follows. But because he's bound into the faith, others are not appreciating him for his spiritual values of oneness, which he was trying to demonstrate by actually going to the sites of multiple spiritual traditions across 9 countries. Which other Indian person or spiritualist from an Indian subcontinent has done that, has gone to Islamic traditions, Sufi traditions, the yogis, the entire Nath Yogi tradition of the 10th and 11th century in the Guru Gorakhnath period, which peaked at the time of the 15th, 16th century and vanished, right? Which other Indian saint has tried to have an interfaith dialogue with these people to understand their perspectives and actually to impart his thought, right? And here's a beautiful narrative that kind of through this journey gives us a hope that in today's divided world, if we can understand other perspectives without being into a confrontation, then that story has a power of bringing us all together. And that was what took us inside. Your question was about the biggest challenge. I mean, you talked about challenges, right? If I remember. So with that background, the question really comes up is what's the challenge in this narrative? Well, before I get into the challenge, the confidence that we got was from the 4.5 years of work that we did for the books. That gave us a confidence that there's some energy working in our favor. If anyone thinks that doing the 2 books in Pakistan was easy, it was not a bed of roses, right? But now the question was, you've got to push the envelope even further. You're going to go into 9 countries. It's a stealth mission. Stealth mission in the sense you have to go back into Pakistan, but now you don't go with a camera and just your mind. You are going to go with a team and drones and big cameras and team will have multiple people inside. You will get noticed, you get spotted, and you have to go into the sites of different traditions. How would you go inside? Okay, that's one part of the problem. Next is how will you get into Afghanistan? How will you get into Saudi Arabia? How will you get into Tibet? And if India seems to be easy because there's no life threat out here, I can walk into Jagannath temple. But the question is, the moment I pull my drone out, will anyone from the people standing out there allow me to pull my drone around and fly it or take out a big camera? So it seemed like an impossible narrative. That's the challenge number one. And therefore I call it as a stealth mission, right? Something worked in our favor. The second thing, as a filmmaker, I'll tell you the second biggest challenge was the narrative itself. Any film that you do, if you do a Bollywood film or a Hollywood film, you have every steps, every moves scripted, and then you just replicate it. Editing is a very thoughtless job in these kind of films which are scripted, because all that editor looks at is the script and every pointer is given inside there. Here you got a situation where Guru Nanak has written nothing about his life. There's no autobiography. The people of faith have written where he is gone, and all he's given us is spiritual verses of bringing together through the dialogues the various traditions of the subcontinent as they existed 500 years back. So what narrative do you take? Right? That's the next question. And then you got to take that narrative and replicate it in the modern times by replicating that journey. How do you bring in the contemporary insights through observations? Just not filming. You got to keep your eyes and antennas open, because you're going to be observing 550 years after when he was born in this life, in this world. You are replicating his journey. But idea is not just replication. Idea is to observe what's happened today. What's working well, what's not working well, where are the learnings. So you got to keep your contemporary insights always absorbed, in this journey. The third thing is, it's a massive narrative. It's across going to 150 plus multi-faith sites, right? I'm not going to get into the permissions. I've already talked about there, but the next narrative is, how do you get the funding for it? Right? Because filmmaking gets very expensive. And when you're trying to do a 24 episode docuseries, which is 20 odd hours of content, which will be something like making 10 Hollywood length movies. I mean, a Hollywood length movie is typically 1 hour, 1.5 hours, 2 hours. Here, talking about 20 hours of content, right? It's like trying to say, people try and raise money for one Hollywood length movie, right? And here you're trying to say you're going to do 10 length movies, though it's a different format, but yet it's going to cost a lot. You're going to take teams move. How do you do that? And that's where I'll end by saying that the overcoming of the challenge was essentially, the first two was because we had been investing for so many years. We knew the narrative. We knew the spiritual dialogues. We had proven ourselves for 5 years with the books, and that gave us the confidence to open the doors. And the last piece is from a funding perspective. It's because what you did prior to this for 5 years in the form of documenting the lost heritage books, that some people who saw the madness in our pursuit, the passion, saw that these guys are potentially able to do this if we bet on them. And if they are unable to succeed, let's say we don't come out of Afghanistan, right? You know what? We tried. Unless you try, you don't know if you're going to succeed. But if you succeed, what you create is something of a cherishable value for the generations to come. And there are some people who are crazy enough like you around the world who have the money and they're willing to bet on you. But deep down, when we were doing this narrative, we didn't know if we could actually come out successful. So rest is all history. We've done it.
Absolutely, sir. Undertaking this project reflects your commitment and the ideas that uphold you and give our lives a deeper meaning. Do you believe that by sharing these stories, the believers of Guru Nanak have somehow found a new perspective?
Um, that's an interesting question, because this narrative in our mind was not made for the one single segment that we tend to believe as believers of Guru Nanak or the adherents of Guru Nanak. Because Guru Nanak, over a period of time, has been boxed into a faith. He's just a spiritual leader. He's on a quest to understand humanity, the oneness, and that need not be boxed into a faith or a boundary of a religion, which it is. So the question is, who is an adherent of Guru Nanak? We need to first ask that, right? If you think the adherents of Guru Nanak are the Sikh community, then I tell you that Sikh community is not actually watching it so keenly as non-Sikhs are watching it, and they're coming back and telling us how it has resonated with them, right? Sometimes, they say in Hindi, "Ghar ki murgi dal barabar," So it's like something which is right at your home. It loses the value. So people within the faith sometimes think, "Oh, I know it all," right? And we are not preachers. We are not telling the story in the typical preaching style, which is how typically narratives of faith will be told from religious institutions. And when you don't do that, the masses are actually hoping to hear the religious. They want to get solace from the troubles of the worldly existence out of someone trying to give them a hope out of a spiritual sermon. That's not what we're doing. We are explorers trying to understand him, right? And so that's a very different treatment. Sometimes it will shake your own belief as a person who's been conditioned to think of who he is, and we're going to shake that from this. So sometimes the adherents themselves cannot get it. But then the question is was our target segment the adherents? No, our target segment happens to be anyone or everyone who is aspirant enough to understand the message of oneness. That's the target segment.
Absolutely, sir. So, the Oneness and Diversity Research Foundation and the Learning Forward India Foundation have very similar objectives: empowering young people with the knowledge of our unique culture, heritage, and values. How else do you think our motives overlap?
Well, you see, the motives are, I think, exactly the same. The way I look at it right now, so in a 9 years journey, we are coming to a point where I'm glad we're finding a partnership opportunity with the Learning Forward organization, because deep down, when we started doing these contents, we are running on a very rapid pace, into creating these contents. They consume 24 hours, 365 days of our breath. But deep down, me and my wife, because she's an equal partner in this, right? So we both keep thinking, we are creating so much of content, but how will this content get down to the grassroots level? One is with the adults, but adults have already lived their lives, right? Sometimes the adults are hard in their mind in terms of conditioning, and for them to make a change is far more challenging than getting the message of unity, oneness, and diversity across to the young minds, right? So we have been very keen on how to partner to find ways to spread this message into the younger minds, right? But when you are involved in your content creation phase, you somehow get lost in just creating the content itself. And sometimes I say, I am 57 years old, and I'm this is a very bad example. My wife doesn't like it, but I'll still give it out here. Is that, when I look at Guru Nanak, I've spent so many years in trying to study him, and he lived 70 years. So when I look at myself and I keep him as a benchmark, I probably have 13 years of my life left, right? As a dirty benchmark, right? And I say each of my past projects have taken me 5 years to complete. And this oneness and diversity, the next phase of our projects and content that we're creating in the next 5 years, will make me 62, right? The point is this finite breath, this limited time. Either you create content or you focus on getting it to the young minds. You can't do both the things. So our belief has been just focus on the content, and if the divine will is there, somehow the platforms will merge. Somehow you got to find ways to partner to give this content into other organizations who can then cascade it down, right? And that's where I think the commonality of this partnership offers a beautiful opportunity in the future. And I think if we put our heads together, we can make it cascade down to the young minds.
Absolutely, sir. We couldn't agree more. And now I will invite Saikiran, the secretary of the Film and Music Appreciation Club, to ask a few questions.
Thank you so much, Anvesha, and it's my pleasure to join your podcast. And with a joyful heart, I would like to welcome Sir to the My Good School Alliance, and especially to the Film and Music Appreciation Club. May it be humans, environment, films, documentaries, or even music. Everything goes through a process of evolution, and we all know that change is the only constant in this whole universe. With different type of technologies coming into play, how has technology changed filmmaking in recent years, and in what ways have you adopted new methods in production, sir?
Well, that's a good question, Saikaran. Look, I mean, the way the technology is moving forward, it's empowering people to be able to become creative bodies at every moment, right? Because technology is empowering us in our hands to be able to do a lot of things. I'm not a filmmaker. I mean, you got my background. I'm an engineer. I mean, I've done an MBA. I've spent 25 years in making dollars and cents for the company, right? I'm a revenue management head. And then I go and do 2 books. And then I go and do, with my wife, 24 episodes, 20 hours of content. That's like making 10 Hollywood length films. How have I done it? Okay, a few things out here. Technology is empowering us. Technology, the fact that you got cameras, the fact that you got, when I did the 2 books, I mean, I'm reminded of a place in the Rawalpindi, in a place called, I'm reminded of my visit to Rawalpindi in the making of the 2 books, where there's a place called Bagh Sardara, right? And that place was made by this family. And there's a big Gurdwara building with 2 Raghunath temples next to it, right? And they are connected to each other. And I went inside the Raghunath temple, and I'm looking at the frescoes. They're all discolored, not kept for 70 plus years, 7 decades since partition, all in a bad shape. And I'm looking at my camera, and I've got an access to that. It's a high security place. Even the people from Rawalpindi have not been able to get inside in 7 decades. I managed to get inside. Now I know the window of my operating inside that temple is going to be very short. So I point my camera and I go click, 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 click. And now for any photography or a filmmaker person will know, when you are clicking a big building, a tall building, and you are clicking from down, the perspective is not going to be right. The picture cannot come out straight because you're clicking from down in an angle. It's going to be angled, right? Now, in a perfect world, if you were, let's say, working for the archaeological survey or photography society, and you had accesses, you would get a ladder, you would put it there, you would climb up, you would align your camera, you would do all those techniques, right? But here, because how does technology help you? You just get the data inside, and then you kind of, in the post-processing, you manage it. That's one way of doing it, right? Now, the other thing is like, getting these, if you see the document, this is the book. Look at the documentary series. Now, imagine if the technology, if you were trying to do this docu-series 10 years back, we wouldn't have been able to get the drone shots of Kailash Mansarovar or Pangong and so many other places. It's because technology has reduced the drones into such small sizes. We have been able to manage to get these across the world. So of course, technology is helping you. But I would like to add one key differentiator here. Technology has made all of us into creative bodies. But a wow product can never be generated unless you have the talent to bring together resources. The experts, the human resource, the experts from different fields who can bring it all together. Because when I took at the cameraman, the drone guy, the car driver, the editor, the translator, the studio, the musicians, it's not one person's job. Filmmaking is very complicated. So I think technology is embedded in every aspect, but the key out here is how do you bring all of them together? So the key out here is always the human element. If you can solve for the human element and then supplement the technology, it will be a wow factor. If you just keep doing technology, then it's just like a mobile phone film that you'll create, right? You'll never be able to create a wow factor.
Thank you, sir. Your journey through ethnographic research to developing and finding yourself more as a documentary and a filmmaker. What tips would you give aspiring filmmakers who are just starting their careers?
All right. So that's a very good question. So tips I would say would be generic tips I'll give. You can apply it to any situation, right? Whether you want to be an author, or a filmmaker, or a gardener, anything you can apply it to, right? So I'll just give you 3 or 4 pointers out here, which I have learned in my life, right? I often tell the youth that, I observe that the youth is often told in the school systems is follow your passion, right? Often we tell, follow your passion. I'll tell you something that's quite contrary. Don't follow your passion, right? It's a very different advice I'm giving you. Create your passion. There's a difference between following and creating. Because when you start creating your passion, you become the passion, right? And it's, for instance, like you want to do filmmaking, you become so immersed in that your thought, you're going to do everything else. But then your thought around filmmaking is such that you are becoming the film itself, right? And that's the creation of the passion, right? Versus just following it. If you keep following it, you'll just keep creating these mobile-based films and you'll never excel. Now, that's one advice. Don't follow your passion, create a passion. The second advice I'll give is that don't try and actually be in a hurry. Take baby steps. Because life is long. Life will give you enough opportunities. As I started this entire podcast by saying that in my case, I was layering myself with different skills. And when the energies kind of understood that I'm ready, it started opening the doors. And when it opened the doors, then there's no stopping. Then you're moving very fast, right? So the same advice I'll give you out here is that take baby steps. Baby steps to build skills. Because you're young right now. Your life's mission probably will unfurl at some stage in life. But that energy is looking for your commitment. So keep taking baby steps. And then as you excel in your passion, you become the passion. You'll find the next purpose of your life will emerge from the behind. So let's say you might start from filmmaking, you might start getting into creative writing, and you might start getting into something else from there. Allow yourself the scope to grow and don't get stuck in one thing. Baby steps and find the next purpose which will be right behind you. And once you excel that, look for acceptability signals and you'll find the next purpose is right behind you. Lift it, start growing again on it, right? So you keep layering yourself, right? And the last piece of advice I'll give you is you're living in a very fast-paced social media world where everyone is wanting instant gratification, right? Don't try and chase recognition. Because most of us fall into this trap that we want instant recognition. So we do things which will give us instant gratification. And that's why you're trying to chase recognition. Have a mindset, focus on your craft, focus on yourself, focus on what you're creating, right? Life is a long-term play. Be so good to be ignored that you cannot be ignored, right? If you are not good, you'll be ignored. Become so good in your craft that you cannot be ignored. And once that happens, you'll find recognition will chase you and you will not chase the recognition.
Thank you so much, sir. That was really inspiring. And before I take my leave, could you please tell us what projects are you taking up in future? And so what's the next thing that we should look forward to?
Well, we got the next project under the Oneness and Diversity umbrella. There are a few documentaries in that focusing on the introduction of our spiritual traditions, which the young minds are, are you're finding are not being exposed to, right? And these are the Indic saints, which cut across faiths, across barriers, as we define today the religious boundaries. They cut across. They give us the hope of amalgamation and giving us the message of oneness, right? So that's the body of work we're doing. Apart from the documentaries, we are building up a course content over the next 4 years based on the writings and spiritual writings from the Bhakti and Sufi movement, because the saints were trying to integrate us into oneness right at that time, whether it be Kabir ji or be Namdev ji or Nanak or Farid or Jaydev, right, or Ravi Das. There's 16 such saints we're taking up, and we're coming up with a website called onenessanddiversity.com, which will be an open source platform. And you could get onto that and you will find the entire bodies of work sung in the rags in which they've been written, with modern translations, where translations need to be now done with the perspective that the next generation is not going to accept the translations that have been done 100 or 50 years back, or even till late, where it seems to be all gender biased to he orientation, right? Most of our translations are masculine driven, right, in the spiritual tradition. So how do you make it gender neutral? Because the next generation 50 years from now will not accept gender biased translations. So you're trying to do that. And in the Indic form of traditions, where all these Bhakti movement and Sufi movement saints were not of the opinion that God is distinct and away from us, but we are the divine itself, right? And the potential lies within us. So those are the kind of interpretations we're taking, and this entire body of website with about 1,750 verses, with a potential to act as a learning tool for the adults or for the youth. It will be an open source platform. That's what we're developing in the next 4 to 5 years. And that ties back into the theme of integration, oneness, and diversity.
Thank you, sir. It was my privilege and honor to record a podcast with you. And also, I would like to inform everyone that our family at my good school in my Film and Appreciation Club has grown, and that Mrs. Vininder Kaur, the joint managing director at Lost Heritage Productions, has joined us as a mentor at the Film and Music Appreciation Club. We hope to take forth many future endeavors with her under guidance and be our guiding beacon.
Thank you so much. She's traveling right now, but I'm sure once she's back into her home base, you guys can touch base with her and she'll have a lot more perspective, especially from a woman's perspective, because she has traveled the entire journey across Afghanistan, Tibet, Iran, Iraq, and she'll add. I can say this docu-series, in the filming of it, there was only one female member, but without that female energy, we as men could not have completed the docu-series.
Definitely, sir. And thank you, sir, and thank you, Sai Kiran. It was beautiful to have you here today. Guru Nanak glided across distant lands for over 2 decades on a selfless pursuit. He engaged in philosophical and social dialogue to relate with people of diverse cultures and belief systems. Through words and music, he gracefully imparted experiential insights, fearlessly challenged the binary constructs of society, and relentlessly opposed gender, religious, racial, and class inequalities. The work put forth by Mr. Amardeep and his team is truly inspirational. Guided by Guru Nanak's philosophy and inspired by historical texts. Allegory, a tapestry of Guru Nanak's travels, a 24-episode docu-series, sequentially presents the life events of Guru Nanak. And with that, we come to the end of our podcast. Comment below and let us know if you liked our podcast. If you want to be a part of similar podcasts, join us. We hope to meet you soon again.
We are here at my good school. Things here are so cool. Together we learn, together we create, together we meditate. Everyone is welcome. Teachers here are awesome. let's shout it out. Hey, let's all be proud. Hey, hats off to my good school. Just what we need, hey, for us to succeed. Hey, are all here in my good school.